All right, good morning, people. Bob here is back once again this morning. We're prepared to break down some Bitcoin. As usual, no time wasted. All right, so daily chart in front of us here. Barely, and this shows that we're actually losing the parabola here on the daily RSI. I don't think that's a given at the moment. I do think that we probably come back down here and sweep the lows again. Bitcoin's trying to hold this little uptrend right here. Is it going to happen? That's a great question. But I could see it, kind of falling off of it here, maybe popping down to this 18.8 range. If it falls below that again and doesn't hold it at all, I mean, if it, whether it's 15-minute, hour, whatever the case may be, whatever it needs to do to hold it, I think this is the level that we look for here at the moment. Anything below that, and I'm looking realistically down to 18.1 to 18.3 as far as on the downside. Now, is it gonna fall that far? It's tough to say. The problem was that last night when we closed the day, we did in fact close below resistance here. We matched these highs here, and thus, even though it started out to the upside, it naturally came back down because we did not set a higher high over here versus here. So we got a little more drawdown. Now, again, the question becomes, is it going to hold this uptrend, or is it in fact going to continue downwards and kind of back into this particular trend line? Well, that's really the question this morning. Now, it was holding on to it pretty good a few minutes ago, and then all of a sudden it just kind of lost it. Really, even just, 30 minutes ago, we were sitting 19,300, really. So, again, I don't know necessarily that it does hold on here, and I think it's fairly realistic to believe it does pop down to here. A couple different reasons for that, and we'll kind of talk about that when we get in on the shorter term time frames here. But as of right this moment, again, we're sweeping some of these lows here. Now, this is the interesting thing here. Like I said, it looks like we're trying to lose this this parabola here. My thought process there is just based on a couple different things. One, this itself almost looks like its own little rounded bottom, right? Like you could argue that this is almost its own little rounded bottom. Or the other thing being that, we've got this little uptrend here, here, and here. So you had a point that touched there, one here, one there. Now the question is that little trend going to hold up? And I think what ends up happening probably, and again, it's just as feasible. It just kind of loses this thing and dumps right out down to here even. But I think that at the end of the day, what we probably get is this thing finds a way to hold on here, and then we get another push to the upside. And then it's either going to break above this trend line and go ahead and crank a little bit, or rejection there, and then it rolls off. But either of those things could be realistic as far as that part is concerned. So yeah, and as far as this goes, we're working on losing some more levels here at the moment. Just tiny levels though. Again, we're this would be a number that I think is realistic anyway. But let's go ahead and we'll jump on over to some other time frames so we can explore that a little bit. So let's go ahead. We'll take a look at the 4-hour chart here and the 1-hour chart as we usually do. All right. So as far as the 4-hour chart is concerned, we've got this little uptrend here that really has been going on since here, right? And you can see that in general, even though the price has come back down here several times, in general, it's been positive price action through there, okay? Now, the question becomes, do we just outright lose this here? Based on the current 4-hour chart, I'd say that's fairly likely. But again, I don't think it's a given. Now, I guess the biggest thing would be that here we did come back down below that trend. We regained it. A lot of times I find that when you lose that trend and then you regain it, that there's a good chance that it is going to roll back off of there. It doesn't always happen that way, and obviously we've seen it both ways, but a lot of times it ends up losing that. I'm going to make a slight adjustment here. I liked that trend line yesterday, and now I don't like it nearly as much. Again, lose this level, and all of a sudden you're down here. So, and that's, I'll just kind of keep pointing out, support and resistance. We don't want to, really, we don't want to lose any of these levels at all. Like, we'd like to be able to hold this 18.7 range 100 times out of 100. But again, you lose there, you lose here, and then you're down here. All right. And again, it looks like it could be a feasibility here just based on the fact that, if I take this and extrapolate that out and we do lose this line, well, then it seems fairly evident that this thing is going to roll down at least to here, which probably puts you down here. If it rolls all the way into oversold territory, my goodness, we're coming way down here. And you could just kind of compare, say, like this to what we're looking at right now. If this thing starts to accelerate to the downside, it's not going to be long, having full of 4-hour candles before we're way down here. And you could see where, the volume started drying up big time yesterday, like huge volume, and then just completely fizzled out there. Now we're picking up volume as it's coming down. So again, the likelihood is, at least as of now, that we are going to head down. And 19.325 is where about 19.3, let's call it, is where the 21 simple moving average on the 4-hour chart is. We're well below that. None of these numbers are accurate. That's what Heiken Ashi will do for you. You can't get accurate numbers on there since it takes a bit of an average. This 18.972 is probably pretty close, though. So again, we're well below that. This thing's going to have to roll down and kind of catch us again. Where's it going to do it? That's a great question, because again, if you take into account what happened over here, and if we assume that this is going to be similar, we may actually see several days of downside, which at that point, let's go ahead and just go back to the chart that we use for longer term purposes. That happens, and all of a sudden we definitely close below here, right? We definitely close below 19.2 at that point, which is something that we wanted to close above. But not only that, but if it ends up being something where we get just multiple 4-hour candles of downside, guess what? We are in fact going to head way down into here. Now, we've been talking about this concept that a lot of times you do end up losing these rounded bottoms, and then somehow after you get these big pullbacks, you find a way to recover back into it. And that's maybe what we may get here. Now that's there's a maybe not like a technical analysis kind of term for that. And this could be essentially a bit of a Wyckoff type deal, where you get these swing lows, you come back up, swing low, come back up, and then eventually what happens is you kind of get this. You get this situation where there's an expectation that certain lows are going to hold. They don't end up holding, but then once they are broken, it's called the spring, and it just fires right back off to the upside. And actually, instead of me trying to just explain to you what this looks like, let's go ahead and just show you and bring this in for a moment. Went ahead and just pulled up Wyckoff accumulation. And I could do a side-by-side, but I'd rather just go ahead and talk about this part. So, essentially, again, and we know this just by looking at the charts that you get impulse and corrective moves, okay? So impulse, correction, this shows an uptrend, impulsed up, correction. Again, same idea here. Now, basically, what you've got here. Now, this, who knows? Maybe this is the or the 17,760 number or whatever on our chart, and we can go over here. Who knows? Maybe that's actually this, right? Now, if that's actually what that is, as far as comparing it here, well, then the problem that we have ends up being that this low, whatever it may be before we get the spring, could actually come in lower than that. Now, if it takes out that 17,760, we've probably got some concerns about the likelihood that we actually recover this. Now, we're looking at a 4-hour chart here. Maybe if we were looking at a daily, it maybe. Matter of fact, we'll try this out here just to kind of make it simpler. Because again, the Wyckoff part, it's just showing you some general concept as to how it would play out. But the biggest thing here is that it doesn't have to, this doesn't have to be a certain time frame. It could take place over multiple different time frames. So the reality is when you're sitting here and you're looking at this, you don't really know for sure. Now, I think it's fair to say that based upon kind of the way that this has moved here, that this very well could have been the move that took us from 17,760 or whatever that number was, all the way up to when we got up here. I mean, that could very well be that move, okay? And then we're in this phase right now where we keep bouncing off of, say, that like 18,300 level. And maybe here we actually do come down. Let's say it is in fact like 17,300 or something. We get a move back off of that. You come up here, you test 17,760, come back up here. Maybe that puts us at a test of like 20,200. Then all of a sudden, you just put in one final test here at this 19.2, and then that's the last time you see that again. And then you start to make your way back up, and that concept holds some weight, holds some water, because the simple fact is we're already talking about it. We know that this thing could have the potential to come on down a little bit further still. And again, we've identified kind of those levels. Now the question will be, does it in fact come on down here and give us a little bit of a, not us specifically, but the market a little bit of a scare that in fact it is going to take out these lows back here. And if it does, again, this 17.3 number right here seems fairly logical, but again, we shall see what happens. But this, just kind of to show you guys what I'm talking about with the Wyckoff in the spring. All right, so let's go ahead and get this thing wrapped up over here. Kind of zoom in just as we normally do on the even shorter term time frames. We'll go back to the 4-hour real briefly. Again, all these different levels here right now, it's 18,875 level, holding up okay. But again, I would have some fairly serious concern about the way that this structure is playing out here. If it holds up here, then cool. We've potentially actually got a different 4-hour uptrend that could be, in play here. But, let's just go ahead and call the spade a spade. We came up here, put in a high that was decent compared to this, but obviously we didn't exceed that high. And then we came up, we put in this move here, once again failed to put in a higher high. Now, yesterday, earlier in the day, I was thinking, all right, this thing's just going to roll over and die like this one did, and it didn't. It spent several hours up here just kind of pushing, pulling, and eventually, this morning it did finally fall off a little bit. But, at this stage, again, lower, high, unless this thing finds some magic way to hold on to a higher low here, and we have this little uptrend, which again, that would kind of keep us in line here, but we need to recover 19,000 to do that. Basically, I mean, it's not perfect trend line, but because these things just don't match up all over the place. But if you go ahead and look at it from that standpoint, again, could have a small uptrend that would start back out of here. Needs to reverse course fairly quickly, because again, you can see here we're down. I think that should be pretty close, 18,866 there. But again, it just, to be honest, it looks like it's probably going to roll over. So I mean, it's it looks a lot similar. It looks very similar to say like this here, where this thing eventually just rolls down. And again, 17.8 is way down here. But again, on a positive note, that would still get us a low that doesn't exceed that 17.6. Now, would that be the spring? Tough to say, because maybe, when we were talking about this over here, it's maybe feasible that this is the level that and right now we're working on the spring action itself, falling down below this level that we hoped we wouldn't lose, 18.7. We've fallen below that a few times. Now, again, the question becomes, when do we get the spring? So we'll see how that kind of comes along here. Hourly time frame. Let's see. One of those two numbers is accurate, but one's an average and one is the current actual price, or at least close to it, which, again, not amazing, because here, yesterday, you might remember me talking about this inverse head and shoulder. We got the move off of it that we were looking for, came back to back test it, and we were sitting here waiting to be buyers here at this 19,150. And it actually looked okay for a few minutes. I mean, Bitcoin ended up rebounding back up to about 19.3 and change. And then it just completely rolled over. And you can see here this trend line. And again, I could always manipulate this a little bit more. I mean, maybe in reality, this thing should just cut through right through here. And then that'll help us find our bottom, which again, is probably, even if I adjust this thing a little bit and let's say that this is the real pattern right here, we'll call that stuff a little bullish fake out. This guy right here, all of a sudden we've got some lines that match up fairly well. What still comes into play is an 18.2 low. That's interesting. On the hourly this morning, I was sitting here looking at this, and I think it was right here at the time. It got a decent bounce. I'm like, all right, cool. And then it comes up here. And then this is where I'm talking about. Or actually, oh, man. But yeah, either way, I was looking at this hourly, and I'm like, all right, yeah, maybe this thing breaks out of here. And then it just dumped right through. And then also, if you take into account the idea that this had its own uptrend, we're basically already losing that. And I don't even know that it looks like it wants to put in a bearish retest. So at this stage, I'm pretty well just expecting this thing will come down here. I just think it will come down here, and I think it will probably take out these lows here. And again, the question just becomes, and again, we'll get in on the short-term time frames. It's not a given that, but again, the 4-hour chart looks terrible, at least potentially, without a reversal very soon. This doesn't look great. You lost this uptrend right here, and now you're working your way back down to oversold territory. But maybe you do have to come down much further before you get there. But either way, we've got some different trend lines that I've got coming into play here. I'm not even into. Oh, here we go. The midpoint of this guy here. Yeah, I mean, if we just bounce off the midpoint, this would be the most ideal scenario. Then you come back up here and hope that 19.3 is not resistance, and that you can actually clear that level again. Otherwise, again, we're heading down. We're heading down, and again, higher or lower high. Bad news. We had a lower low here, so the likelihood of taking out this low is fairly strong at this stage. And again, Plan A, Plan B. So there you have it. Now, again, just to get in on the shortest term time frames, let's go ahead and get this thing looked at. Now, I've got another trend line here, and this one I just kind of matched up to the peaks on this guy and then the troughs on this one, and you kind of cut through here. Here's a trough. You're pretty well right at it at the moment, just slightly above it, and then you've got this trend line that's coming down here in this downward fashion. Now, if this thing can bounce up here, okay, great. Like I said, maybe we get something positive going again here. But you're potentially at that point, you're potentially back to flipping this into a resistance, even if you come back up and retest it. Just tough to say at the moment. And then you've maybe got maybe we could argue that we've got a bit of a falling wedge concept going here potentially. Let's say like right here. maybe you've got this falling wedge concept, but this doesn't really, this doesn't have the looks of a falling wedge really. But you could maybe argue that that is possibly in there. On the 15-minute, you do have this falling channel that is getting to the point of oversold. So it is feasible that, again, we do see some level of recovery out of here. But again, the 4-hour stinks. The hourly stinks at the moment. So if we don't get a nice bounce out of here, things become questionable very quickly. And again, I've got numbers down into this range that are logical targets at that point in time. So that's pretty much it for today. Upside target, it's tough to even justify telling you what I think an upside target would or could be for the day, especially given that we may have already hit our high side target for the day. Right here, we might have already put in the high when we hit 19.6-ish overnight. Yeah, 19.629 was the high in there. Might have already hit it. So, ideally we weren't going to lose this level, lost it temporarily. Ideally, we're not going to lose this one. We'll see here shortly. Already working our way out of here. Stochastic RSI is, kind of falling over here. But again, there's still a little bit of a chance that this thing actually is a rounding type of scenario and that it will, in fact, pop up off of here. But again, right now it doesn't look amazing. So, but yeah, I mean, look, if this thing does magically turn around today, I think 19.2 is realistically probably the highest number that we see today. But it would set the stage for tomorrow to actually work out to give us one more maybe upside push here. And heading into the weekend potentially as well. But that's maybe where my concern comes in a little more this time. Typically we look at the Thursday through Saturday-ish for long trades. But, if this thing kind of dies down into here, let's say it happens today, then maybe, we go into the weekend where, you can long this thing and expect that maybe it actually does go cranking back to the upside. But again, we got moving averages that are still misaligned on the daily. So a lot of things that are playing, potentially for or against us here. But again, I just want to see this thing pop back up here into this 19.2 range, and then we can feel a little bit better about life out of Bitcoin and heading into the weekend. But it definitely feels as though we've got some levels breaking down out here. And that it's not showing signs of immediate strength. I mean, that's pretty well where we're at the moment. Downside targets, I think we've talked about that sufficiently at this point. Upside target, we're probably not doing too well there as far as any potential higher upside targets for today. Again, at this point, I might be very surprised if we set a higher high today than we've already set. But in the event that we magically do, again, you're looking 19.7, maybe this daily 21 simple is just a bear right now. We got hard rejection here, came back up, got a rejection, came back up, couldn't even make it as high, hence rolling over a little bit now. Just got to be prepared that, in fact, this thing is going to maybe have a little more destructive downside. And then again, this particular trend line here for my daily chart, I can't necessarily say that this holds a great deal of water here. I don't even know where I can move it that it makes logical sense, unless we just take this double bottom out of the equation, call that a fake out, and then here's our uptrend. Well, here's that trend line down here. If this thing's going to come down, it's got a pretty decent way to go. That could be 2-3 days worth of downside there. So again, I guess it just depends on what the powers that be are going to show us this time. Are we going to go into this week and just collapse, or go into this weekend and just collapse and totally lose this lower end? Feasibly speaking, yes. Do I think for sure that's going to happen? No. because of several other things that are going on. But maybe this thing does need to get deeply oversold one more time. But again, I've got concerns if it falls much further. So let's hope that this week, if it is, we've got this cross taking place. We've talked about that multiple times. If it is, in fact, going to be something that pushes us down, let's just get that out of the way this week. That way we can start to work our way back up the ladder and get a good impulsive wave to the upside going. And then again, we can start talking about possibly coming back and actually trying to tap the 200 simple, or at the very least come back and run up to the 21, which who knows, maybe it'll be down here by the time this move plays out. So again, lots of excitement. Let's see what we can do. Big day. Let's go. Appreciate you guys. As always, we will catch up tomorrow.